so you're caught up to what I've seen. I saw the first 3 episodes of X-Men 97, and now so have you. Do you still think they're not racing ahead with this story? And I do, as I said before, I question the point of the series because they're not really giving you enough time to re-experience or learn these storylines. And then in today's episode, they make some major changes. One I'm okay with, I understand it, but one, oh, it really frosts my cookies. And I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on it as well. We meet Mr. Sinister, who is rumored to be who Kevin Feige wants to be the villain in his for his MCU X-Men. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the fabulous and fierce Goblin Queen. We do have a lot to discuss. But it is weird to make such big deviations from the comics, especially when you essentially wipe out one of the greatest comics or limited series that I think has ever been written about the Summers family, which, don't worry, I'm going to tell you about it. And I recommend, I mentioned comics here. I recommend you go read them. They're really good. And I think it's a missed opportunity, particularly with the Disney Plus app. There isn't the ability to go and be able to read these comics at the very least and click through to them. Bob Iger said he even wanted to sell stuff on the internets. So what's happening here, man? All right, so there are a lot of comic book Easter eggs, though. So Morph cameos, that's Spiral, for those of you who aren't familiar with her. Good joke about raising the hands. And not just one, but 2, Illyana Rasputin's, a.k.a. Magic, who, of course, Anya Taylor-Joy brought to life so vividly and perfectly in that god-awful failed New Mutants movie. But she was fantastic. You not only see her innocent New Mutants look, but also after she too was altered by an evil madman, which makes a nice parallel to, of course, what has happened to Madelyne Pryor in this episode. See, again, if we had a little more time, we could highlight that, but only those of us who know the stories already, because this show isn't telling you, are able to catch that. Also, I think it was a big missed opportunity that she didn't show up during the hell sequence, because that's where she has her torturous transformation and ends up, kind of ruling the place. So I was like, Morph, your timing is off, man. All right, the wedding in so many ways. Oh, he's flirting something fierce with Wolverine. I was going to bring it up a little later, and I will again, but I just had to bring it up. All right, so the wedding photo of Scott and Jean, that is the iconic Andy Kubert cover. He's one of the Kubert brothers, and very famous, and actually their father, Joe Kubert, very famous comic book artist. I believe Joe Kubert actually had a comic book art school. But anyway, Andy Kubert would go on just a few years later to do the art for Wolverine's iconic origin story, which they raced to do at Marvel for fear that the movies would beat them to it. Very good. What a comic. Love it. All right, also, Rogue Magneto and Gambit's Nightmare. That is a reference to the look that they had in the Savage Land, where they were both trapped, and first connected, right? And of course, Mr. Sinister in the comics did create the Jean Grey clone Madelyne Pryor, who became the Goblin Queen, and it was to get his hands on the combination of Scott Summers and Jean Grey's DNA. Why didn't he just make a Scott Summers clone and have him get it on without any problems? That's because he's a sick and twisted individual. All right, but then he just likes to be mean to Scott. But then that's funny. All right, but then the story, that's where it starts to make some major changes. No, somebody should bring that up to Sinister, being like, why don't you just mix the DNA yourself, man? You're making clones everywhere, left and right. All right. In the comics, Mr. Sinister created Nathan Summers to make a powerful enough mutant to take on his former master, none other than Apocalypse. That's right, that guy. But Apocalypse learned of Mr. Sinister's plans, kidnapped Nathan, and it was Apocalypse who infected him with the techno-organic virus. Because Mr. Sinister had used it before, but on Apocalypse as his first attempt to take his old master out. Didn't work, although Apocalypse still found himself, infected. So he was like, all right, let's see if this Mr. Sinister says this DNA combo's all that. Let's test it. If Nathan Summers can defeat the techno-organic virus, Apocalypse was going to move into his body because it was impervious. He was like, okay, fine. All right, so that was the setup. And that's a little overly complicated. I don't think the story necessarily needed Apocalypse, so I'm okay with changing that. But here's where I said, my cookies get frosted. All right, so Nathan was indeed sent into the future in the comics to save his life. But He was brought there by a group of anti-apocalypse women, Clan Ascani, which actually ended up being led by, it was revealed, I'm sorry this is a spoiler, but it's so important to why this story is crucial, so I have to say, it was revealed to actually be a much older version of Scott and Jean's daughter, who had not yet been born when Nathan was born, but yet there she was, far in the future, saving her baby, technically her older brother, Rachel Summers, who was a huge character. More than that, it didn't even stop there. Rachel pulled Scott and Jean's minds, sorry Madelyne, not Madelyne's, even though she is Nathan's birth mother, pulled Scott and Jean's minds into the future, in the bodies of two people who currently lived in the future. Well, I guess that's two people in the future, current, I don't want to mess you up. And then in those bodies, Scott and Jean were able to raise Nathan in the future for like 12 years or something like that, right? It is all detailed and chronicled in an incredible miniseries, limited series called The Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix, which is critical to the story of the entire Summers family. So it's so weird to me that the people who made the show would ignore it and basically wipe it from existence. I'm like, you just patched over an incredible bit of X-Men storytelling. Probably one of, if not the only truly interesting things to happen to the Summers family, who are, let's be honest, a little bland. All right, so here Bishop, because I guess he needs a storyline. I mean, we see Bishop's sister, who he abandoned in the future, right? He also gets a nice little move from Cyclops where he powers Bishop up. I thought that was nice, but apparently that's not enough. He needs a storyline, so he's going to take Nathan into the future because he knows a guy who can build almost anything. You know who that sounds like to me? And any X-Men fan would know, Forge, whose mutant ability is an unparalleled infinity for technology. Eat your heart out, Tony Stark! Not only can Forge build anything, but he can kind of sense technology, like energy signatures, if technology is working. He can almost talk to it and understand it. Again, next level Tony Stark. And what do you know? Who shows up in the current timeline at the end of this episode? Forge, offering Storm the chance to get her powers back. Oh, by the way, Tequila Mockingbird, what a great name for a bar. Apparently that's gotten some use over the years. I Googled it to see if it was a real place, and a lot of people have used it, but I never heard that play on words before, and I thought it was a hoot. Anyway, in the comics, romance drama alert. This is such a funny show. But, this is also why, the X-Men are like the Bravo corner of the X-Men, and maybe one of the reasons I like them so much. They're great. I love a good Bravo show, too. But Forge and Storm also had a romance. Oh, it was steamy, but it didn't last. And there's a very specific reason why, which if this show plans to do, and who knows, but if they do, no spoilers on this one, but the groundwork has already been laid. We'll see. So it looks like we're going to maybe have Forge helping out in the present and the future. And that could make for a sweet little episode. Let's see if that's what happens, because again, I've only seen the first 3. Speaking of drama and romance, not only is Rogue and Magneto's closeness making Gambit sweat. I love it when Gambit refers to himself in the third person. But where does Crop Top go? But I think it's pretty clear Morph has, as I said, a crush on Wolverine. But, continuing with this theme of romantic drama, Wolverine, though, only has eyes for Jean Grey. But here, unlike the movies, we can see that she truly loves Scott. Wolverine's like, yes, that's how much I love you. And she's like, oh no, Scott's in danger. And really, really Wolverine, read the room. It's not working. Although it's interesting, if you read the origin comic that I mentioned, they explain why he's drawn to Jean. So she shouldn't take it it's like he likes her, but not just because she's so great. I mean, you'll see. It's interesting. All right. So great comics. All right. Full disclosure, this is also coloring my interpretation of events a little bit. After New X-Men, when Grant Morrison had Cyclops and Emma Frost have an affair, one of the greatest stories also of the X-Men history, I gotta say, I became Team Emma Frost. I am hardcore Team Emma Frost. So, I really don't like Jean Grey. Whose team are you on? If you read that story, you're on a team. I just think Emma Frost not only makes everything more interesting, but I think she makes Cyclops more interesting. I think Cyclops makes her more interesting. I just think they're a better couple. I feel bad that they eventually broke up. I'm still a little upset about it. All right, however, last week I said we were seriously missing some X-Men bitches. Mystique and Emma Frost. Oh, fabulous ladies. And they're still not here. But this week we got a suitable stand-in, Madelyne Pryor, aka the Goblin Queen, who is dressed an awful lot like she's from the Hellfire Club. But she's not. She is, there's a reason for how she looks. It's very comics accurate, although they PG-13'd her up a bit, which is weird because Gambit showed more skin last week. And they also gave her a green-purple energy signature, which is very Halloween. Her fight with Magneto, very nice. I liked that. The stained glass window, excellent touch. So many nice visual moments in that fight. And it even ends with a classic 1990s distressed and shirtless Magneto. Oh, of course it ripped his entire shirt off. Who will nurse his wounds? I bet there's a line. All right, the Goblin Queen look, the reason she has that look is it ties into Mr. Sinister's motif, her daddy, which is, well, come to think of it, Poor Things. This is interesting to me. In fact, the critical success of that film, I'm not a fan of Poor Things, but my business hat sees an opportunity here. That's how strong my business hat is. I'm like, I hate that movie, but I see an opportunity. All right, so maybe Poor Things' success, critical and with cinephiles, makes Sinister seem a little more timely. You could give that in the interview, being like, hey, you see Poor Things? I have a PG-13 version of that. Because, as I said, there are rumors swirling that Kevin Feige might go with Sinister as his first X-Men villain over Magneto, who has been done a lot already. Mr. Sinister almost made it into the Fox movies. As you might recall, he was the tease at the end of X-Men Apocalypse, with that briefcase marked Essex Corps, as Sinister's agents were after, what else? Mutant DNA. Mr. Sinister's real name is Nathaniel Essex. Mr. Essex is a take on Victorian science, and he's actually from that era, and he knew Charles Darwin, a twisted take on survival of the fittest with mutants in the mix. Sinister keeps cloning himself and transferring his mind. That's how he's able to do Madelyne Pryor. He's got a lot of cloning experience, and that's how he's still alive in the present. He just keeps re-upping himself. Sometimes he even has more than one clone going at a time. You'll notice here also when Scott hits him with his optic blast, Sinister's body is able to repair itself because he's often making upgrades. And also, he's probably got another body on Cold Freeze somewhere next door, so don't worry about it. I haven't been a fan of the idea of using Mr. Sinister in the MCU, largely because, as you can see from this episode, he takes the X-Men in a gothic horror direction, and that's not why I watch the X-Men. But the timeliness of Poor Things makes me feel that there might be something here. I'm like, what's the number of that production? I think she won the Oscar, right? She did. That team did. I'd be like, get me the production designers on Poor Things. Let's see what we can do. What do you think of Sinister as the first MCU X-Men villain? If you're familiar with him and if you just happen to be introduced to him. All right, I think the story elements with the two Jeans are okay. As I said, I'm not a Jean Grey fan. Thankfully, Mr. Sinister signed his work, so they didn't have to wonder for too long. Beast was like, "Is that one?" That was funny. All right, and then Madelyne destroyed the sample. Like, that's going to end the conversation. Oh no! All right, so anyway. Not only did Mr. Sinister sign his work at the molecular level, but right on Madelyne's forehead, which of course is Mr. Sinister's giveaway trademark diamond. And eventually he comes to use the whole deck, clubs, hearts, and spades. It seems a little silly to me, but whatever. One interesting line with the Jeans was this idea that they didn't know for sure when Sinister switched them. I think that was just wishful thinking on the part of Madelyne Pryor. And it was very nice of the original Jean Grey not to call her on it, but like, nice try. Because she was like, maybe I was the Phoenix. You don't know. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure you were the Phoenix, or you'd have a little bit of Phoenix power in you. And you clearly don't, bitch. All right, so anyway. In the comics, it's actually super clear when they made the switch, though, because Scott just meets a woman in Alaska who looks a ridiculous amount like his dead girlfriend, who had just died in the Phoenix Saga. And there was some question as to whether maybe not she was Jean reincarnated in some way. But really the idea was to give Scott a happy ending, a happily ever after. He retired from the X-Men like he wanted to here, and he had a family until the comics needed him again. And then the shit hit the fan, and his crazy Madelyne Pryor became the Goblin Queen. It's just crazy. All right, so again, it's funny. The X-Men, now that I think about it, it's so great. It's even better that Grant Morrison did what he did when he took over the X-Men, because he brought back that soap opera quality that the comics don't even have right now. I mean, that is really, I guess when you think about it, a hallmark of the X-Men. And I wonder if Kevin Feige will do that in the MCU movies. That would be pretty great. It would be a cool way to separate them from the rest of the MCU. All right, so again, this episode has some great visuals. The horror sequences even had a little Miyazaki to them. But it's really just glimmers of famous X-Men storylines. And in some cases, very big liberties are taken. So what do you think of X-Men 97 Episode 3? Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.